Well, today we finish the book of Proverbs, which is a little sad because it's been an exciting journey. But the good news is there's a happy ending to this book. In Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31, the overall counsel is that if you want to live happily ever after, marry wisdom. This is such a perfect way to end this book because in the overall structure of Proverbs, you had the first 9 chapters where the father was trying to convince his son to choose Lady Wisdom over Lady Folly. He was teaching his son the kind of woman that he should marry. And now the book ends with a mother telling her son to marry Lady Wisdom too. And I like to think he finally does. Proverbs 1 through 9 were like the introduction to Lady Wisdom. Proverbs 10 through 30 was about the courtship period where he was getting to know Lady Wisdom better and what makes her so different from Lady Folly. And then finally, in this chapter, he makes the decision to marry wisdom for life. And while, of course, this is a personification of wisdom, the wife she's describing here is very real. And she wants her son to marry a woman who is the embodiment of wisdom in all that she is and does. And this is such a beautiful description of what a woman of wisdom is like. In fact, it's an acrostic in Hebrew, which means every line starts with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. They have 22 letters in their alphabet, and there are 22 verses here. We would say this woman has everything from A to Z, and we don't have time to go through every verse in detail, but when you read over it, you notice she has so many of the qualities that we've been talking about this whole time in Proverbs. So many things that we've read about wisdom up to this point are evident in her life. And he starts by acknowledging in verse 10 how rare it is to find a woman like this, a woman that her husband can trust because she has his back and she's in full support of him and everything she does is for his good. And she's a hard worker who doesn't look down on menial labor as less than, but rather delights in it because of the blessings that it provides for her family. She's willing to go out like merchant ships to find supplies for her household. She gets up early and she takes care not only of her children, but of the servants in her household as well. But of course, her work is not limited to the home. She goes out and considers a field and buys it as an investment so that she's not just working hard, she's working smart and putting her money to work for her by buying a vineyard that will produce a return for her over time. She's strong, not necessarily because she's in the gym pumping iron, but because she's so active and such a hard worker. She makes her own clothing. She reaches out to people beyond her household and finds the needy out in the streets and helps them too. She does not allow fear to dominate her life because she's a woman of faith and she's prepared for whatever difficulty the future may hold. Her husband is well known in the gates because people know her reputation and his reputation is helped by his association with her. And probably she's a woman who talks her husband up to other people and tells everyone how great he is and helps boost his reputation in the community. Plus, she's working so hard on these other responsibilities it frees her husband up to take care of his responsibilities as a leader in the community. She has her own side business and she makes clothing not just for her own family, but to sell them to tradesmen to help other families. I love verse 25. She smiles at the future because she knows God is with her. In verse 26, she uses kind words. There are women who run a really tight ship in their household, but they may be bossy and mean and snarky about it. She's not like that. She leads her family in humble servitude and kindness and encouragement. She's not lazy. Her children rise up in the morning and bless her for being such a wonderful mother. And her husband praises her too, because even though external beauty may fade with time, a woman who fears the Lord will always be beautiful because her character lasts for all eternity. And in the end, she'll be rewarded for all of her hard work, not just because of what it produces, but because of the way people will look at her and praise her for generations to come. Now, there are so many applications I could make from this passage, so I just want to challenge us in two ways. First of all, think of this in the context of dating and marriage, because young men today are poisoned by pornography to the point where all they look for in a woman is a hot body in the face of a model that just stops you in your tracks. But when you're considering marrying a person, looks cannot be all there is. They need a strong, godly character. Yes, you should be attracted to them physically, of course, but sometimes young men make the decision of who to marry based solely on physical attraction, and that can be so deceptive because we assume if a woman has a great body, it means she has a great character, and that's not always true. In fact, sometimes the reason she has such a great body and looks like a supermodel is because that's all she's focused on, and she doesn't work on her character nearly as much as she works on her body. So this passage helps young men know what kind of qualities to look for in the woman they want to marry. Likewise, this helps young women know where to put their priorities to become the kind of wife that is the embodiment of wisdom. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look beautiful and wanting to be in shape. In fact, it says that she is physically strong, and in verse 22, she covers herself with fine clothing. Being a spiritual woman doesn't mean you gotta wear a potato sack, but it does mean not making that your top priority. And just as men have been poisoned by porn, women today have been poisoned by feminism. And I'm not saying there's absolutely nothing good that came out of feminism, but I am saying it has largely been a dumpster fire, and it has destroyed families, not just in our country, but in other Western countries as well. And if you're thinking to yourself, I don't need a man, and having children is just a financial drain, and family life crushes my dreams and keeps me from reaching my full potential, that stuff is totally poisonous, and it'll lead you to take on a role that may make you a ton of money, but it will not be in line with your God-given role. So don't buy into the lie that being a mother and making your home your primary concern somehow makes you less than. This woman in Proverbs 31 wasn't just barefoot and pregnant. She went outside the home and conducted business elsewhere, but her primary concern was not her own career and success. It was the success of her husband and her children and her household as a whole. And sadly, this kind of woman is becoming harder and harder to find. And then the other challenge is something that will bring us back full circle to something I said toward the start of our study in Proverbs, that wisdom is not just a proposition, it's a person. Wisdom is not just a set of skills, it's a relationship. Proverbs personifies wisdom as someone we should marry and make a covenant with and walk with and live with every single day of our lives. Because when we make a one flesh union with wisdom, it'll change our life forever. And that's why this points to Christ, because he is the ultimate embodiment of wisdom. And even though in the New Testament he's pictured as the groom and not the bride, the message is still, if we want to live happily ever after, we need to marry Jesus, because he is the wisdom of God incarnate. Jesus himself said someone greater even than Solomon is here. Paul says in Colossians 2 and verse 3, in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And in 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 24, Paul says Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. So as we call on God for wisdom today, our prayer is, Father, help me as a man to be on the lookout for women who are the embodiment of wisdom. And if I'm a woman, help me to be the embodiment of wisdom so that I can be a blessing to my family. And most importantly of all, help me realize wisdom is most perfectly embodied in your Son. And may I marry him so that I can have a happily ever after ending, walking hand in hand with your wisdom for all eternity.